name is Liz, I'm a fashion and art historian and the founder of the fashion label Pelagona, and on this channel I'm telling you the stories behind fashion trends. Fashion month is almost over. There were many interesting fashion shows, but one caught my attention, and this was the Yves Saint Laurent Spring-Summer 2024 collection by Anthony Vaccarello. I watched it online, and immediately afterwards I also followed the discussion online, and I realized that this collection really polarized. On the one hand, people loved it and said it is so simple, so elegant, quiet luxury. At the same time, there are a lot of people who actually hated it and said it's too boring, too simple, and even the likes of Zara and Massimo Dutti could have done this. I got intrigued and also did some research, also what inspired Anthony Vaccarello, and actually there are 3 garments that are closely connected to Yves Saint Laurent himself that inspired the collection, and also the whole collection stands for female empowerment, and this is what I would like to discuss with you today. Let's dive into the details. Before I discuss the current spring-summer collection for 2024, I would like to share some information about Anthony Vaccarello himself, because I think it's always interesting and important to also understand the design development of the creative director. Vaccarello was born in 1982 in Brussels to Italian parents, and he initially studied law, then switched over after a year to sculpture. And he has always been inspired by the likes of Comme des Garçons or Azzedine Alaïa with their signature shapes and cuts. And in 2006 he won at the Yale International Festival for Fashion and Photography, and this was also when Karl Lagerfeld heard about him and then offered him a job at Fendi for the fur line. In 2008 Vaccarello moved to Paris to start his own label with his own name, and he then won the Andam Prize in 2011, and he got very famous in 2012 when Anya Rubik wore a dress by him for the Met Gala, and after that he had many celebrity followers, for example Miley Cyrus or Jennifer Lopez. In 2014 he joined Versus, the sister label of Versace, and in 2016 he replaced Hedi Slimane at Yves Saint Laurent. Vaccarello's predecessor Slimane was famous for turning the brand into rock and roll, as some people call it. Some people, like the business of fashion, even say he turned Yves Saint Laurent into a grunge label, and he also had a strong focus around Los Angeles. So Vaccarello, when he came, he gave him credit and said that Slimane was the reason why Yves Saint Laurent moved into the future. But he clearly moved the brand back from this Los Angeles-centered focus back to Paris. And he also did these infamous things like, for example, deleting all the Instagram posts on the brand's account to show that something new is coming. When he was appointed the CEO of Yves Saint Laurent, Francesca Bellettini said that he was the perfect fit because he uses masculinity, sharp structures and cuts, but also makes them look very feminine. And I think this reflects also the philosophy of the brand, but also Yves Saint Laurent himself very well, because Yves Saint Laurent was famous for taking male elements and adapting menswear to womenswear and make it look very feminine and elegant. I personally have always been a big fan of Yves Saint Laurent himself. I would even call him a genius. I think his designs were not only beautiful but also groundbreaking, and they reflected the development of the women's movement as well. Because when I think about his designs, the safari jackets, which I'm going to discuss later, the Indian-inspired collection, the sheer tops, all of this, they stand for something so special. When a new creative director takes over, I'm always a bit apprehensive, or I wait until I make my final judgment, because this is not an easy task to take over a brand with a name like Yves Saint Laurent. For us here it's easy, we lean back, we can discuss it, we can say what we like, what we didn't like, but actually doing it and turning plans and dreams into this reality is not that easy. So I always take a bit of time and wait and see what's happening with the brand. In the beginning I found the collections not really cohesive. There were some themes, but then suddenly there were certain garments that, in my opinion, did not really fit into the collection. Sometimes it was a lot of use of animal print, sometimes it was certain colors that I thought didn't really work together. Yves Saint Laurent was very experimental himself with colors, but it worked, and sometimes here I had the feeling that the brand tried, but it didn't really come to life in a great way. The first time when I realized what Vacarello is trying to achieve was a camel-colored tailored jacket with black latex, and the model also wore a very interesting type of black hat that had a real 80s feeling to me, so I really liked that styling of that outfit. The second one was a safari jacket in a very nice pink color. So I got the idea, he's going back to the archives and he's trying to basically turn those garments into something for the future. And then from 2021 you could see the ball rolling. There was one spring 2021 design that I really liked. It was a black sheer top with a high neck, and he paired it with a golden necklace and also a big flower belt also in gold color. And the same year for the fall 2021 collection he designed really fun tweed jackets in really bright colors that worked really well together. And then he also had some golden brownish colored jackets as well that were really nice. They could be seen as a bit too much in the style of Chanel, but I think it also worked really well for Yves Saint Laurent, maybe his more opulent years in the 80s. And then since 2022, he really found this balance between the new interpretation of the archive pieces and his own design language. I think it's always quite difficult to work with archival pieces because it could be on the one hand too literal, like a copy of the old design, or it could be something that has got nothing to do with that old piece and just speaks the design language of the creative director himself. And I think he finds a really good balance between representing Yves Saint Laurent and the philosophy with his Vacarello twist, let's put it like this. And one last example I would like to give here is some drape designs that reference designs from the late 80s, where he turned it into a modern version of these draped dresses with some hoods, and he also paired it with big coats and biker jackets. So I think that already showed really well how he works with the archival ideas and then gives them the Vacarello twist that I mentioned before. Now let's come to the main topic of this video. It's the runway show for the Spring-Summer 2024 collection. It took place outdoors in Paris and the backdrop was the Eiffel Tower. In my opinion, the Eiffel Tower was not really needed because I really enjoyed this simple runway design. There were some fake walls put up that looked a bit like marble or like desert rocks, and this is already the first hint. It takes place in the desert, in the Sahara. And what do we immediately think of? Of course, it's the Saharienne, the infamous safari jacket designed by Yves Saint Laurent in 1967. And this is fact number one about this collection. This safari jacket served as the major inspiration for the whole collection and the runway show. This jacket was designed by Yves Saint Laurent himself in 1967, and it was actually meant as kind of like a one-off piece because he designed it for a photo shoot with French Vogue. But then he introduced it in 1968 into his collection, and it got so popular that from 1969 onwards he also sold it among his ready-to-wear collection. Why was this so special? We have to put this into context. This is a garment that comes from menswear. It's a utility garment, let's put it like this. And in the 1950s, the whole fashion was influenced by the new look started by Christian Dior. And it goes back to this idea that women had to look feminine, the hourglass shape, the bell-shaped skirts. And then Yves Saint Laurent did completely the opposite because he took men's garments and adapted them for women. He took these elements and turned it into something very feminine, and also the silhouette was not at all this hourglass silhouette. And this safari jacket is also very important when we look at what changed in society. Women wanted more rights, they asked for more rights, they wanted to free themselves, they wanted to be empowered, and they also did not want to look feminine anymore. They wanted to wear the same clothes that men wore, they wanted to wear pants. And then Yves Saint Laurent just basically takes up this whole movement in his fashion and gives women a men's garment to wear and makes it look really effortless and yet still very feminine. So this safari jacket has become an iconic piece for the brand. There were many iterations of it, many references, also other creative directors reinterpreted the jacket. And what did Vacarello do? He turned it into something very simple. Before the show, backstage, he said that he wanted to make the collection very simple. He wanted to remove everything overly complicated, such as decor items like embroidery, for example. His jackets looked very lightweight. He used cotton, and it is a reference to what Yves Saint Laurent himself used, because Yves Saint Laurent used cotton gabardine, which is very good to wear in a hot climate like the desert. And along with his idea to make things simpler, Vacarello removed the crisscross in the front and substituted it with big buttons. And this jacket is then referenced in many ways, like for example as tops, like shirts. It is then combined with skirts, with cargo pants, and it looks really effortless and chic. I think what he tried to achieve is a wardrobe where you don't really need to think much about how to pair all the items. Even if you just take the safari jacket dress or safari jacket inspired dress and then put on a belt and nice earrings, you are ready to go. And again, it reflects this whole attitude towards women that Yves Saint Laurent already created for his brand, to empower women, because the safari jackets were initially inspired by the Africa core, or we could say the Occidental men. White men in Africa wore those kind of uniforms, and then Yves Saint Laurent adapted it for the safari jacket for women in 1967. And this is also what Vacarello tries to do. He actually said his goal with this collection was to empower women, to basically give them the utilitarian garments, the workwear of men, and empower them. And this brings me to fact number 2, the jumpsuit. As I said before, the safari jacket came up in different interpretations, and the very first interpretation on the runway was a jumpsuit. And the jumpsuit is again an iconic garment by Yves Saint Laurent. The jumpsuit originally came from aviation. Pilots were wearing this garment, and it actually covered up the male body shape. And Yves Saint Laurent then got inspired by it. So in 1968, he took up the idea of this jumpsuit and again adapted this male garment to women. And he did actually exactly the opposite. While the male version covers up the body shape, Yves Saint Laurent's version shows the curves of the woman. It looks very elegant when his models wore the jumpsuit. Already when the first design came out on the runway, it was this cream-colored jumpsuit that again looked very elegant because it had elongated legs. It was very long, and the model wore the jewelry, the big 80s golden jewelry and the high heels with it. I already got this feeling, and you now will laugh a bit. It's like in The Little Prince, Le Petit Prince, where you have the pilot in the desert. And this was exactly, I think, the feeling that Vacarello wanted to create. And similar to Yves Saint Laurent, he was inspired by aviation, but he was inspired by the female pilots. By the pilots like Amelia Earhart and Adrienne Bolland. The latter was the first woman to cross the Andes from Chile to Argentina. At first, I was a bit startled when the first ensemble came on the runway and the model wore this specific pilot hat. I did not get the reference at first that it was a pilot's hat. But then when I read up about the design, and then I also did some research and found pictures of these women, it is very clear what Vacarello tried to reference here. In addition, he also had many models wear the typical aviator shades, just to make this point very clear. Another interpretation I found online was that these jumpsuits may reference the ones in Formula One, the technicians and the race car drivers themselves. But I think that's a bit far-fetched. I don't really see the point here because it somehow also doesn't fit into this overall theme. And I think with the accessories, it becomes quite clear that Vacarello wanted to make a point about these female pilots. So overall, I think Vacarello did a very good job with this jumpsuit, or this interpretation of the safari jacket and the jumpsuit, because he also had these cargo pants and the elements of those cargo pants. I personally am not a big fan of cargo pants because I was a teenager in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and it just reminds me of our fashion faux pas. I know it goes along with this overall fashion trend at the moment, but what I have to say about his cargo pants is that they look very feminine and also very elegant. So this is an interpretation that I can live with, and I really like and appreciate the focus on female empowerment, on this whole taking a utilitarian garment for men and turning it into something very feminine and sexy for women. Another detail I would like to mention here are 2 further elements taken from menswear. The first one is the trench coat. We often forget that this garment also originated from menswear and also from the military, from the war, and now it's kind of like an unisex item, but I think together with this whole reference of the safari jackets and the jumpsuits, it was quite a nice hint. I think it was 2 outfits where there was a trench coat involved. And the second detail that I noticed was the rolled up sleeves. So it's again something like women roll up their sleeves, they work hard, they can be as good as men. So this is also something that I really appreciated. One thing that was discussed very often online around this show was that Vacarello is usually known for his evening wear, and for this collection there were actually only 3 long dresses or gowns. They were quite simple, and I would not say they were the star of the show. He actually ended the show with 2 ensembles with pants again, and again with the reference to the safari jacket. One was a cropped version, so I think this might have been a statement that shows can also end with pants, but also that something that's actually coming from menswear can also be worn in an elegant way for the evening. That could be another interpretation. And now we have arrived at fact number 3 for the inspiration for this collection. It's the sheer nude look by Yves Saint Laurent. This again is something very, very iconic for Yves Saint Laurent himself, because he created that already before the jumpsuit and the safari jacket. And this again reflects the zeitgeist of the time. As I said before, it was the time of the female empowerment, the women's liberation movement, and this also shows that they owned their bodies. And there were other designers like, for example, Rudi Gernreich and his iconic monokini. He basically had this bathing costume where the breasts were completely bare, and similarly Yves Saint Laurent took this up and he launched these transparent blouses. And one of his most iconic designs of this nude look, as it was later called, was a dress with a sheer blouse, and it came with an ostrich feather belt. And this is also a detail that Vacarello took up again. We saw it paired with the cargo pants or with skirts, for example. And what I also appreciated is that not only the young models wore those transparent designs, but also the more mature models, still with an amazing body. But I think this is also a very beautiful signal that it doesn't depend on age. So when analyzing this collection, it becomes very clear that Vaccarello was heavily influenced by the work of Yves Saint Laurent in the 1960s and also the overall development in the 1960s. The sheer tops are nothing new for Vaccarello. He has done this before, but I think the statement in this collection is much stronger than it was in previous ones. To close this up, some details that I would like to mention here are, for example, the gloves. It's another reference to Yves Saint Laurent, which is nothing new for Vaccarello. He has done it before, but I think in this collection it worked out very well, better than in previous collections. Maybe it was because of this more reduced color scheme. I also appreciated that there was this time no animal print, for example. Vaccarello himself even said the aim for this collection was something new, a blank canvas, something very simple. So I could really see this. There were simple tank tops that I also liked. Again, nothing new for Vaccarello, but I think it worked really well. I liked this simple touch. I also liked the opulent 1980s jewelry, the bangles, the big earrings. I absolutely love the gold. And I also think that the makeup was really beautiful, because we had these simple clothes and then you had the 80s makeup with the red lips, which I think was quite a genius idea. What I didn't like that much were the simple short dresses. In my opinion, they were maybe a bit too simple, maybe a bit too boring. There was one dress which had quite an interesting structure at the neckline, but somehow it did not really fit into the rest of the show, in my opinion. But overall, I appreciate it, and I appreciated this collection for a reason. It's a ready-to-wear collection, and it is one of the first collections recently that you can actually wear. Very often I look at shows and I'm thinking, but who wears this? This is ready to wear and it's very experimental, which looks fun on the runway, and I'm sure it catches the interest on Instagram or on TikTok. And I know that the fashion business has a big focus on these media now, but similar to what I discussed with Madame Fashion in our talk about the Met Gala, for me it's always more about the garments than about the noise around, the marketing around. And yes, it might not be the most innovative collection or groundbreaking, but it looked very elegant. And what I appreciated was this whole inspiration behind the collection, this female empowerment, the references to the Yves Saint Laurent archival pieces. And I don't want to take it too far here. I don't want to compare fashion directly with art, but very often when I look at contemporary art, at first I might not understand it, but when I then hear the story of the artist or I read about it, I understand it. And I had the same feeling with this collection. At first sight, it might have looked a bit simple, maybe boring if you're a bit cynical, but when you then looked closer, you understood it. And I actually ended up liking it because it was a bit unexpected. It looked very simple in the beginning, but then by doing the research, I actually appreciated it more. And I'm very curious about your thoughts. Are you in that team that says, we love it, it's beautiful, we want to see more like this? Or are you in the team, we absolutely hated it, it's too simple, it's too boring, Sara and Massimo Dutti can do it? Let me know in the comments below. I really enjoy the conversation with you. You can also discuss this with me on Instagram, for example, or on Facebook. And I have also written an article on thepinklookbook.com. You can also send me an email there. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I thank you very much for watching. See you soon and goodbye.